Hi, I'm Tasha Cleveland with Latitudes Gallery, and I want to explain to you how to install a three-piece triptych artwork. So a triptych is artwork that has three panels. Sometimes it's in more than three panels. It depends how wide your artwork is, but most commonly it's two or three panels when you're working with a multi-panel piece. And so since I do all of the art installation for Latitudes, I wanted to walk you through step by step my tips and tricks on how to get it right the first time. Now, I've had my share of headaches. I've had my share of days where the math just doesn't make sense. And a lot of times it won't. A lot of times it will defy physics and logic. And triptychs can sometimes be a pain. But if you follow these tricks that I show you, it'll be a whole lot easier and faster when you hang your artwork. So the first thing is to have artwork with a wire on the back. If you have a 3-panel and it has cleats on the back, that will be a different video that I'll do later. So today it's wire hung artwork in 3 panels. So let's take a look at how to do this. Hello. So the first thing is you want to get your confirm your location and your spacing. So usually what I like to do is hold that artwork up so I can see what it's going to look like. And if there's more than one person, that makes it easy. In this case, in this room, we are going to center on the sofa. And sometimes, and it's going to have a 1-inch gap in between. I always start with a 1-inch gap. Sometimes you go a little bit wider, but I start with 1. You want to base it depending on the viewer distance. So if you're further away from the art, you could go a little bit wider, but we don't want big chunks of space in between the artwork because you don't want it to be like separate sentences. You want it to flow as one sentence with a slight pause in between. So in this case, we're going to center it on the sofa with a 1-inch gap. And I like to either, like I said, hold it up, or if it's behind a sofa, I'll often prop it up because usually I'm by myself. And then I can kind of take a look at how those gaps are looking and spaced out. So the next thing that you want to do is figure out what your horizontal center is. So if we're centering it on the sofa, finding the center of the sofa. If it is going to be on the wall, you want to find the wall. Now, generally, you want to center your artwork over the largest piece of furniture or over the furniture it's going above. So in this case, a sofa, sometimes a headboard, sometimes a side table or a credenza. You would always want it centered above that because that's anchoring the space. That large piece of furniture is anchoring everything on the ground, and then the lines are being brought up onto the wall. And so I usually check from both directions just to make sure my math brain is on, and use painter's tape to mark that on the wall. Now, I love to draw little arrows on my painter's tape, and I tear up a bunch of pieces and get them ready for me because oftentimes if you do not mark where your measurement is, you'll get lost. You won't remember if the measurement was the top of the tape, the bottom of the tape, the corner of the tape. You're going to get lost. So I like to add these little arrows, and that will remind me as I'm going through all of these measurements what I was talking about 5 steps ago. So the first thing is, after you get your horizontal center, you want to figure out where the top center of your artwork is going to be. And you want to mark that with painter's tape. I like to mark the top and the bottom edges of my artwork. That way I can take a step back and really look at it. And then I can adjust, and just all I'm moving is those little pieces of tape. I don't have to like sweat through it trying to hold up a bunch of pieces or a big piece of art. So the tape is usually my first step to figuring out the location of what I want it to look like. And then often I'll hold that artwork up over that tape and confirm with the client that that's where they want it to be. Then what you want to do is figure out what's the difference, what's the distance from the top of the art that you've just marked on the wall, the top of the art down to the wire. And you want to pull that wire taut like it's going to be hanging on the wall. So you want the distance between the top to the wire as if it's being hung. And the other thing you need to watch out for is, because usually I can't even imagine it would be a machine tied, but almost always these are tied by hand. So someone is stringing this wire through and wrapping it around. It's never going to be exactly the same. As hard as they might try, it's probably going to be 1/4 of an inch different, 1/8 of an inch different, just slightly different between all the panels. And so you definitely want to go from panel to panel and double check those dimensions. Then what I do is, you see this little piece of painter's tape on this panel? I mark it on the panel so that I don't forget later. I also lay them out. You can see they're spread out essentially in a row in front of me, because you want to make sure you're starting with the center panel, and you want to make sure that you don't mix them up, because I promise there have been times that I hung up a whole piece of artwork and then realized that my panels were out of order, and then I had to adjust it again. So lay them out in front of you in the correct order, measure all of the wires, and mark on the backs with painter's tape that dimension so you don't forget it later. Now, if using your center panel as your starting point, assume this is ground zero, right? This is our starting point on the wall. This is where we want everything to be. But because that is hand tied and those side panels might be a little bit higher or lower based on the wire dimension, the dimension to the wire, you want to start with the center and then go up or down on the side panels. Everything starts with the center panel. And then what I like to do is I do a little note on the wall to remind me. So I do the math now so that I don't get all confused later. So do the math now. So say the center panel is 7 inches down from the top. The wire is 7 inches down, but the right panel is 1/4 of an inch longer. So 7 1/4. That means my right panel is going to go up 1/4 of an inch. And say the one on my left side, my left panel is 1/2 an inch shorter, so it's 6 1/2 inches. That means I need to go down 1/2 an inch. And I'm going to forget later if I don't leave myself a little note. So I stick these on the wall just like this, like at an angle, to remind me, because if I do it like straight as if it were an accurate measurement, then I'm going to get confused at what I'm looking at. So I usually write down 1/2 an inch, up 1/4 of an inch, or whatever my little note needs to be. You can even use Post-its if you need to. And I just slap that on the wall in the rough location of where I'm going to be doing my math for my side panels. This will save me later from being confused. Now on the wall, you want to measure down from the top mark down to where the wire will be for the center panel. Now remember how I said I like to use my arrows? You can see right here, I have used that arrow to denote that I am measuring, that this is my starting point on the tape, the bottom of the tape. And then you can see I've used that arrow again to come down, because I can't really easily slide that tape underneath my measuring tape. It gets a little bit hard to do that. So those arrows really help me remember later on what I was pointing to, what those dimensions were. So you're going to measure on your wall the top of the art and mark it, and then do another piece of tape for the wire. So we've got these 2 distances marked on the wall. You've got your cheat sheets just slapped up there so you don't forget later. And that is roughly what it looks like when I'm doing it. If all the panels are the same width, then the distance out to the side hooks will be the width of a panel plus the 1 inch gap in between. If those panels are not the same, sometimes the center panel is going to be wider than the side panels. This occasionally happens. If that's the case, you're going to take half of your center panel measurement, the gap, and half of your side panel measurement. So we're adding up half, a gap, and half. But when they're all the same, half and half, it's easy, right? So they're all, half plus half is all the same when they're all the same size. But when they're not, you're going to have to add up the center panel half, gap, side panel half. That's going to tell you how far from the center mark over to the side mark, okay? This is me measuring that. I do check every single panel, even though I know going in that it, like, I might assume something. I will always double check. You know that saying, measure twice, cut once. I always double check because sometimes it might be different. Then from your center panel mark, that's this one, the wire mark on your center panel, you're going to measure out the distance to the side panels. So your wall is going to look like this. You've got the top of the artwork down to the center wire. Then you've got the distance of the half panel gap, half panel. And here's your wire. And the same thing on the other side. This is where my handy dandy notes come in extra handy. I will also take the top tape off now because I don't want to get confused on all of the pieces of tape on the wall. So I focus on just the ones I still need. So I will take off this top piece. And you can see that there. I've taken off the top piece. I now have my hook and I'm measuring out my side panels. You want to level your side wire marks to the center panel wire marks. So in this step, we're just going to make it level all the way across. Don't worry about having to adjust. We'll do that next. And then you're going to level it. I like to use a laser level on this because oftentimes those panels are really far out and I don't have a level long enough. Sometimes the levels are only like 3 feet wide and some of the panels that I install alone are 3 feet wide. So it's way easier when you've got a really long piece to use a laser level, but it's not necessary. You can use a level as long as it reaches between the center to the side. And you want to level that. Now you're going to adjust the side panels up or down based on your notes. So this is when I do that additional adjustment. You can see I've got my level mark, but then I'm going up 1/4 inch. And you'd want to do that on both sides. And then take these little cheat sheets off of the wall. So you've got these marks on your wall now. You take your cheat sheets off. These are now adjusted based on the wire for each of those panels. And you want to hammer your hooks with the bottom edge of the hook at the mark on the tape. So remember how I use those little arrows? I draw them on with Sharpie so that I remember. Was it the top of the tape? Was it the bottom of the tape? Now I know the wire location is where the arrow is. So you see now I've got my hook, not the nail. Sometimes that can get confusing and you might forget. The nail does not go on the spot. It's the hook. Is the bottom of the hook is going to go on that measurement. You do want to mark the bottom center on the center panel and the center on the wall just below the art. So this is one of the things that I have found that has saved me a lot of headache. And you don't realize how big of a deal it is until you have spent like half an hour trying to figure out why the math doesn't work. So the next step is going to be, now that you've got your hooks on the wall, the next step is going to be hanging that onto the hook, the center panel. Everything starts from the center panel, okay? So center panel first, we're gonna hook it on the wall, but before you do that, you wanna know what the center of your artwork is, and you want something to line it up with on the wall. So I stick a little piece of tape on the bottom of my art, a little piece of tape on the bottom, on the wall near where I'm going to be hanging it. That's the center of the wall or the center location on the wall. And that way, when I drop it on there, I know that at least my center panel is in the right spot. If you don't do this, sometimes it'll be slightly to the side or it won't exactly be in the center. And then you're trying to adjust all the side panels and nothing will be level. And it can be off by ½ inch and then everything's wonky and it's all tipped to the side and your gaps won't work. So starting with that center panel, make sure your center panel is good. And then I like to command strip it with the command Velcro. You can see how it's got these hard little teeth. It's all the hard side of Velcro. I like these best because it's easy to remove for the client. So all they have to do is pull this little tab and that it's not pulling off a chunk of their drywall. I don't know why the Velcro always just pulls off that skin coat of drywall. So the command Velcro doesn't do that. And I stick it on at the bottom of the artwork. And before I stick it on, I put it on the back of the artwork, and then I grab my level and I push it on as I'm leveling it. That way I know it's in the center, it's lined up with my marks, and it is now stuck because everything's coming from the center panel. Now we work our way out to the sides. So you want to hang the side panels on the hooks, space the gap, and check the level. So I like to use either my level as my gap spacer. They're usually about an inch thick, or my painter's tape. Oftentimes I'll wear the painter's tape on my wrist and it's like a bracelet, and then I'm walking around the rest of the day with some painter's tape on. And then I just take that painter's tape and I kind of roll it in the gap and I tuck things in. And that allows me a quick measurement of making sure that my gap is 1 inch. So that's what I'm doing here. And then I check my level on the sides because I know my center panel is level and it's stuck down. It's not budging. If I don't stick my center panel down, then as I'm doing these side adjustments, it's going to throw off my center panel. And then I'm going to have more of a headache because nothing's staying put. So I want my center to stay put, and then I adjust from there. So if you find this time that you're slightly, and you can see on this one that I've over adjusted just slightly. What do? So you've got your artwork hung on the wall. You've confirmed that your gap is correct, that your level is correct. Now you want to take that level and measure if anything's off just slightly. If it is just slightly lower on one panel or higher on one panel, now is when you want to slightly adjust down. So you've got everything level, center is locked down, gap is correct. Now we adjust. We don't adjust before then. So then after it is level, spaced, if you are slightly off with Latitudes Gallery hand-tied wire artwork, you can very gently pull down. Now, I'm going to tell you Latitudes artwork because I know how it's tied. It is tied across the wire, through the hook eyes, and then wrapped around that wire. So what happens when you very gently pull down to adjust a panel up to 1/4 of an inch? I do not adjust any more than that. It's a micro adjustment. When I gently, slowly tug that down, it will tighten up that twist on one side and tighten up the wire in the back and give me a little more slack to pull it down. If you did not get your artwork from Latitudes, then I cannot promise you that trick will work. I just know Latitudes pieces and how they are constructed. So what that does is it saves you from having to do another nail in the wall just slightly above, because that can be a problem too. You don't want 2 holes in the wall and then it's not going to stay. So up to 1/4 of an inch adjustment, you can slightly tug those things down. Okay. Once those are in place, they are level, you are happy with all things, then you want to command Velcro the other panels at the bottom to keep them in place. Why? Because when you have a 3-piece and there's natural movement in your house or in the hallway or whatever, wherever this artwork is, there's going to be vibrations and movement, and you are constantly going to have these pieces of artwork shifting. And when you have lots of lines, you don't want them shifting. You don't want to be staring at this over and over again, having to straighten it up every time you walk down the hall. So that is why I use Command Velcro on the bottom of the panels. It is not holding the artwork up, so it is not a safety issue. It is a leveling, keeping it locked down, keeping it how I like it. That is what it is for. That is all you have to do to hang a 3-piece panel artwork. I hope that was helpful. I hope that gave you the insight that you needed. If you have more questions and want to know how to hang your artwork and it was not covered in this one, jump over to the website at latitudesgallery.com and click on how to hang your artwork. I've compiled a whole bunch of information so that you can get it right the first time. Thank you so much for purchasing a piece of Latitudes artwork. We are so happy that you have found yours and have transformed your space. Till next time.